Hi, my name is Barnes, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of intelligence. And we're also going to do an activity to recreate a replica of an ancient and distant human ancestor skull, just like the one I'm holding in my hand right now. As you can see, this Paranthropus skull is actually made from cardboard, and it's based on the dimensions and details from a real 3D scanned 1.7 million year old fossil found in Africa by Richard and Meave Leakey in the early 1970s. While this is not a direct ancestor of humans, it is a close relative. Early human skulls are fairly rare and precious in the fossil record, and when they are found, they provide some of the most valuable clues about the evolution of our own intelligence and just how we came to be. And this is what it's all about right here. Through studying the spaces inside the fossil skull cavities, we can determine the relative sizes of our ancestors' brains and how they increased over time. Note here that monkeys have brains that are only 100 or a few hundred cc's in volume, while humans have over 1,500 cc's. Well, along with our brain sizes, our intelligence has also increased over time, and according to this graph, most of these changes have occurred within the last 1 million years. But is it just brain size that has made us more intelligent, or even brain to body size ratio? Well, if that were the case, we would be as smart as mice, because we share similar brain to body mass ratios of about 1 to 40. Or maybe you might think large animals like elephants and whales have an advantage because they're so large, and their brains are so much bigger than those of humans. In fact, sperm whales have brains that are 5 times larger than humans, weighing in at over 18 pounds. But there's a lot more to intelligence than just size. There are also a number of other things like cortical convolutions and types of brain cells, otherwise known as neurons, and other factors at the microscopic level that influence how we learn and adapt to new environments. But now, let's talk about how you can make your own fossil human ancestor skull replica at home. First, go to africanfossils.org and select the 3D models of your choice. In my case, you could see that this Paranthropus skull has a very detailed 3D scan image, which you can use later on and rotate and zoom in when sculpting and painting your skull. The first step you'll need to do is download and print a PDF of the individual 3D slices of your chosen skull, which you'll need to cut out very carefully. There will be a lot of these individual paper cutouts when you're done. These pieces are then used as stencils to make cardboard pieces, which you should be sure to cut out using an X-Acto knife or scissors and number them very carefully. When you place them on top of each other in order, you can begin to see they take shape. You can use pretty much any type of glue you like, but I prefer hot glue, since it allows for quick setting of the pieces, and you can always rework them if needed. Make sure you use the small crosshair guides on the templates to make sure you're lining up the pieces the right way, especially on the more difficult layers. And when that step is done, you will have something that begins to resemble a human skull. And since the next steps involve using plaster, I'm using a layer of thick acrylic paint to make sure that the layers are adhering really well to each other, and also add a barrier layer to keep the cardboard somewhat waterproofed when smearing the wet plaster on top. After the paint completely dried, you can see here that I've got a fairly wet mixture of plaster of Paris, which I'm pressing into all the nooks and crannies of the skull to ensure that this will be a very solid piece when it's done. This is just the first layer, so it doesn't have to be quite perfect. After drying, you can see that there are still a few holes and areas where the cardboard is exposed. But after applying another layer of plaster by hand, you can see that it's not too hard to fill in all the holes and do a little sculpting to make sure that you have a shape that matches the original as closely as possible. You can use sandpaper in some areas to remove some of the bumpiness of the plaster. Here I'm using a fairly wet mixture of acrylic paint to make sure that the color is able to penetrate very deeply into the surface of the plaster. And after applying a little variety of color and blending the dark and the light areas together, you can see that we've got a pretty good base coating. Highlights and accents can be added on top to make it look more realistic. And there you have it, a human ancestor skull.